This is Luke Johnson from the Noetic Humanities Teaching App, and here is Charles Clifford Brooks III to teach us about Langston Hughes.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen. As Mr. Luke Johnson has said, we're going to be talking a little bit about Langston Hughes. He was an activist, poet, and screenplay writer, amongst other things, during the Harlem Renaissance, which has by no means been forgotten, but should be put in the same echelon as we revere those who were a part of the expatriate movement in Paris, France, like Hemingway and Ezra Pound. I think Upton Sinclair was in that bunch. James Joyce spoke of it. A lot of those names ring true, but then when you come back, you have to realize that here in America, while there seemed to be or was created a void in some of our boys going overseas, in Harlem, the African-American community became an atom bomb of culture. I mean, fresh sounds. Some people have said that the best thing America has ever given the world is jazz music, and I would be hard-pressed not to agree with them. Miles Davis, Coltrane, Thelonious Monk. You have Billie Holiday, Dinah Washington, Dizzy Gillespie, and more. That all came out of this period. At the same time as these writers with Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, their ilk came along and really forced people out of their comfort zone as far as I believe a lot of stereotyping was concerned. And the fact that you can't sit there and be racist and degrade another race of human being when you hear their music and cannot deny that that same vibrato, that same elegance and same grace that you felt in Beethoven, Chopin, and Brahms was what you got from Herbie Hancock and Miles Davis and John Coltrane. You can't do it. The intelligence there, the intellect, the poetry, the stories, the movement within the African-American community, Zora Neale Hurston being one of those that took it upon herself to travel and record these stories in the South, and I believe yes, and she went to Haiti as well. They began to, the idea of a persona and your identity became anew, not just for the African-American community, but once you inject into all of a culture something so inescapably perfect as what the Harlem Renaissance created, it enriches us all. Now, the poem we're going over today is called Mother to her son, Mother to Son. And I personally picked it because I've been thinking about my mom. I've told a lot of stories about her. I just had a seminar over the weekend where I'd tell my usual jokes and people say, oh, where do you get your material? And it's from real life. And so this show is dedicated to my mama, Jeanette Fleming. She is wonderful. A saint, and I've made her a thug, but I'm not in prison. Thank you, Jeanette. But Langston Hughes has a great deal in the same connection, and the story he tells with Mother to Son is a double entendre of don't give up on life, don't give up in life, don't give up on yourself. But at the same time, you'll pick up the hiding, talking about being in the dark, not knowing where you're going, having to turn corners, having to look back, having to be afraid and unsure of yourself, is of escaping slaves. And I'll read the poem. And you'll feel about midway through how it comes away from just purely a conversation between a mother and a son, but also that of a history lesson. So let's get into it. Mother to Son. Well, son, I'll tell you. Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I've been climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on them steps because you find it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now. For I's still going, honey. I still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's one of the most powerful poems that I'm aware of. Langston Hughes obviously uses language in its purest state. And people seem to have a problem with this all the way back to Chaucer, where he said, let's reach the most people by writing in the language, not that talks down, but the language in which the people are using it. And in this sense, it's kind of reversed science as far as poetry is concerned, and taking the way really people, the way they sound in their speech, in the streets, in the vernacular, if you would. and putting that on paper. And sometimes, again, you're going to have to bend the rules, and you're going to have to try and again, I keep preaching this, to read this stuff aloud. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. To me, the crystal stair being, again, mentioned twice. And what people need to remember, especially when you critique or try to review or study any work of literature, whether it be fiction or poetry, nonfiction, if a writer who has sat down and meticulously mapped their story, if they take the time to use special punctuation, a different kind of spelling, something that's out of the norm, in poetry, it's mentioning something twice, the repetition of something. Most, if not a vast majority of the poets I've talked to have the same OCD thing that I do, that we don't like to use the same term or phrase or word more than once in each poem. So to use it twice is almost an echo of something very important. If you didn't catch it the first time, you'll catch it the second time. Life ain't been no crystal stair. You're looking up. To me, as I translate the crystal stair, literally looking up is to freedom, to liberation, whether it be culturally as far as the civil rights movement, or literally when you're escaping slavery, to get away or running towards a life that is a crystal stair, whether it be heaven, literal sense, or the idea of you not being property anymore. She says, my way has had tacks in it and splitters and boards torn up, almost again as she's trying to flee something being torn down behind you. In places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I've been climbing on. And no matter how scary it was behind you, how many dogs you had on you, how many demons you had in you, you move forward. You don't look back. You don't give up. It's not an attempt to squeeze an aside in, but the point, the depth at which this poem reached to me is the way in which my mama speaks to me. And it's not in the same cadence. It's not to be said as poetry strictly in the way we mean it now, but in your own struggles. And as this poem just bounced in my head all day long, all week long, since last Friday, actually, the more I realized the importance, the idea. I've already had one lesson about, keep it going. It's that same kind of idea, only on the other side of the coin that's saying, don't give up. I've been climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners, sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. There's that little mama bit again. Don't you start whining to me when you don't know what bad is. I'll tell you what bad is. And every person that has had their parents said that has just had a shiver up their spine, because it's true. Every generation's desire, I think, is to make it not easier on the next, because it's like breaking a butterfly out of the cocoon too soon, but to say, toughen up. Put your big boy drawers on and quit griping. So, boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on those steps, because you find it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now. For I still going, honey. I still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. I mean, we have 20 lines of poetry here, and each one is a punch to the gut in the best possible way. It gets its fingers in your mind and you can't pull it out, and it's not supposed to. I think beautiful things take root and great things happen. And this is one of those poems where, again, you've got the climbing stairs and reaching on landings and looking around corners, the idea of literally escaping the landowners, the slave masters, and to give him that glimpse into a real hard time. And I'll say, now, yeah, it still sucks. And I'm still trying to get ahead. I'm still me, your mama. And it could be that she has gone on to heaven. It may be that she has passed on, and this is a prayer between the two, that she has gone there. She's still climbing. She's still in the afterlife. She's still got that. She's finally reached that place in the sky, and her life wasn't no crystal scale. It's not no crystal scale for anybody. It's something that we're always trying to attain. It's not the impossible, but it's having someone there in your life, whether it be a mother, father, best friend, uncle, grandmother, that will stop and take you by the hand and say, I love you to death, but you're going to have to quit complaining and get on with it. And I believe in this poem, Mother to Son by Langston Hughes, you find all of these universals. You get just a taste of the Harlem Renaissance and the idea of how you take culture and you make it yours and you make it intelligent and you make it ring. Because when it does, everyone hears you.
It's a wonderful poem, Cliff, and I'm glad you chose to speak about it. One of the interesting things that I think about when hearing you talk about it, and we don't have to dwell on it very long because I don't want to make Noetic into something that deals with a lot of identity politics and things like that.
Right.
But, you know, something that I'm thinking as I hear you read the poem is that I do not, it seems like it's an extension of yourself, but some individuals may think that this is an African-American person's poem, right?
Right.
But it seems like it's very much in the cadence of the South. So it seems like you can pick it up and speak to it in a way, and it doesn't seem like there's any real difference between that voice and yours. Do you think about those issues at all when you read poetry? I mean, or does it even enter your mind for a second? Or what would you say if anyone was perhaps critical of your recitation of this?
That everybody has their own opinion, and that the beauty of poetry is that people take different things from it. But on the broader scheme, and again, agreeing with you not to make this a socio-political discussion, I can tear it down to, I have thought a great deal about it, and the atrocity that I believe is happening in bookstores where, you know, I was of course not there, nor am I speaking to that kind of pain, but there were people in the 50s and 60s to today that are dealing with racism that were during the civil rights movement, had dogs set on them and hoses turned on them, to have all the books, of course on a much grander scheme, but to have all the books put together as fiction. And now if you go in, all the cultures and sexual identities have been split apart, where this idea of where, oh, well, you know what, this wasn't written by someone that on the surface I may think that I can identify with, so I'm not even going to try to go over to that bookshelf and wonder what these people are writing about. It's putting all of these people into one bookshelf, whether it be poetry or fiction or nonfiction, because you're just looking at names, you know, and without, you know, pictures on the back. Sometimes when you take that book out and you flip it open and you read it, you realize, I would have never known. Because I think the intellect, and I think these universals, whether it's the poem Keep It Going or Mother to Son, you have that same universal theme of a parent to a child, to someone needing guidance, to finding that guidance, to looking back to your history. And even if that's not your history, in a very real way, to keep that from happening again, you have to make it somewhat as deep a part of you as your own thoughts of, who am I? Where do I come from? It's keeping that universal eye open, keeping that world view open to understand people. But as Aristotle said, you know, to entertain a thought and not accept it as fact is the sign of a true mind, of an intelligent mind. And that mind is I truly believe in many people. And I think that it's critical that we do assess without brooding over where somebody comes from, and be more about the ideas and be more about these commonalities, because that's where peace comes from.
I enjoy your perspective. I think we share it. Well, Cliff, thank you very much. That was wonderful. This might be one of my favorites that we've done, and I hope that the work that we're doing here popularizes Langston Hughes' work and the perspective of unity that you have articulated in this lesson.
Thank you, boss.